Today we are beginning the classes for the 5th sem, the third year philosophy. We are going to deal with the contemporary Indian thought, Indian philosophy. To understand the contemporary Indian philosophy, we need to go back to a little bit of history, how this Renaissance, the revival came about. Contemporary Indian humanism was a revival of the humanistic spirit of the ancient Indian culture and religion and the medieval Indian efforts to integrate staggering humanity into a single fold of the basis of universal brotherhood. So here we will see that all the contemporary Indian thinkers, they were trying to bring about a revival, a change. It laid emphasis on tolerance and respect for life, the conviction that God could be understood in terms of love for all living beings rather than anything else. As a matter of fact, the theistic humanistic outlook evolved through the efforts of Hindu and Muslim saints during the medieval period, became the foundation for contemporary humanists. So contemporary humanism is something that is the contemporary Indian thinkers become so humane about or involving themselves into the lives of the people. Another important factor which contributed towards the development of contemporary Indian humanism was the impact of Western influence on the Indian culture and social outlook. The weakening of the Mughal Empire in India, neglect of the ideal Indian nationhood by a small princely states in their mutual quarrels helped the Britishers to set firm foot on our Indian soil. It cannot be denied that British rule contributed towards the political unification and administrative stability of our country. It also brought new awakening in the people through education. The scientific temper of the Western education proved to be a great force and spearheaded the humanistic efforts of the contemporary thinkers. So we can see from the medieval period, there is the Sufi saints and the poet saints and the Bhakti movement making an effort to revive the system. And then the second phase we can see the humanists themselves, the Indian contemporary thinkers, the Western education which they received, that also helped in building up this movement. During the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, religion in India became the complete domination of the designing of corrupt priestly class. So something which made the contemporary Indian thought to that extent was that of the religion which played a major role, in the sense religion which was supposed to alleviate, to help the poor, the downtrodden and give them a hope. It became a very big cross for them. To maintain the supremacy of the Brahmin priests, they were interested in keeping the people ignorant and fed them with the false hopes of a rewarding afterlife. They commercialized religion by introducing costly ceremonies and offering to the image of gods. As a result of these efforts by the vested interests, the real spirit of Hinduism was clouded. Besides religion, the inner life of the Indian society was still more deplorable. Many social evils such as child marriage, burning of widows, on the funeral pyre of the husbands, that's called sati, general degradation of women, and division of Hindu society into endless castes and subcastes weakened the whole Hindu society. Some of these evils quietly crept into the religious communities. Bigotry, intolerance, mass ignorance, and a communal rivalry shook the entire structure of the country. In brief, all human values were set at naught. So we can see the three phases that is coming. From the beginning of that is a medieval period where a type of revival is attempted, and then we have the Britishers coming in, the Mughal Empire weakening, and that gave a chance for the Britishers to set foot. So the small princely states, they were actually fighting with one another, and that weakened the structure. So there was no united effort on them to stand together. So as the saying goes, divided we fall, united we stand. So this was not there. The division was there among them, and therefore the Britishers easily took hold of the situation and they set foot. So that was a blameworthy thing on our Indian soil, in the sense that we ourselves were not very sure what or how to go about. The real revival starts in the 18th and 19th century. And what could be another cause for that? That is the religion itself, that is the priestly class dominating, especially the Brahmin priests. And they were always on the top. And because of that, they did not want to share that authority, power, and privilege. And say they saw to it that never power or privilege went to the others. So they always remained on top, and they dictated terms, and they made religion something unbearable. They commercialized, and they made elaborate rituals and made it difficult for the people to be performing any of this. So only very wealthy or the affluent people could really afford to offer something. Along with this, we see the evils that is spreading in the society. For example, sati, then child marriage, then the degradation of the women, and religious practices, or the division of the society into various fragments, and this all weakened the Hindu society. So ultimately what has become, in brief, all human values were set at naught. So humans were not considered so much. The degraded social system and artificial compartmentalization resulted in mutual hatred and discontent. So there is a growing discontent among the people, among them, because they are suppressed politically, religiously, and economically. All the way there is no hope for them, and that's being somehow they are feeling very much depressed. It was the time when India began to pass through an age of resentment. So when a person is driven to the extreme end, then there is no other way other than to retort or revolt. That exactly took place. So it was a time when India began to pass through the age of general resentment, reaction and opposition to the existing religious and social values. It was also the time when India saw the new light of Renaissance, Reformation, Enlightenment, and Reconstruction. So in order to revive, in order to survive, they had no other way other than to resent against, revolt, and that became the real Reformation. Hinduism has been socio-religious way of life. The reformers, as a result of awakening, were liberal thinkers and extended the principle of individual liberty and democracy to the field of religion. So we can see the reformers who are coming in, they were well aware due to their education plus they're feeling one with the people, that they want to bring about a bit of new thinking into the religion. Why religion? Because that became the very source or substance of the living, very much influenced. So in India, we could not think of a life without religion. So practically everything was oriented towards that. Therefore, reform in religion became necessary because the social life was based on the religious principles. Pioneers of the Renaissance in India reasserted the classical values of Hindu religion. The religious movements like Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj, and the Ramakrishna Mission were earnest effort to recast Hindu religion into a new form in order to meet the requirements of the new society. In the introduction to his book, The Social Renaissance in India, K.C. Vyasa rightly mentions two important conclusions in the history of social reforms in India. First, the reformers tended generally to strive towards a universal rather than sectarian standpoint. Second, it was a movement from the more religious to more secular outlook. Thus, universalism and secularism remain two important characteristics of contemporary Indian humanists. So when we deal with the the contemporary Indian thinkers, we have to come to a realization that the two aspects remain very much. One is universalism and the secular outlook. So why these two aspects are very important? On account of just the history what we have seen, we will be able to realize that. That is the oppression of the people. The religion became very, very tough in the sense they were not able to really worship a god, but only it became so much of ritualistic, and that became a problem. These thinkers labored for reawakening the Indian mind and for a synthetic humanistic outlook to meet the needs of the time. So what we are going to see in the Indian thinkers is a real awakening, a new way of understanding religion, society, politics, economics, and everything of that. The efforts were facilitated by British rulers who began to show interest in the social life of the country by 1828. The combined effort of the Indian humanists and the British government resulted in the abolition of certain obnoxious social customs like slavery, burning of the widows, female infanticide, and other forms of human sacrifice. So we can see that the Britishers who became dominant, the rulers, and we became the slaves of the Britishers, on account of our own mistake, in the sense we became very weak, or India was ruled by princely states, small states. They began to fight among themselves, and there was the ultimate result of was intolerance, degradation, and there was disunity. That weakened the Indian society and India as such, and therefore it was easy for the foreign rulers or the invaders, the Britishers, to occupy this territory and dictate terms. So in one way, later on we will see that how this helped to revive the reform. So what we are trying to see is a general introduction into the contemporary Indian thinkers, going through a little bit of the history, how the revival began with the medieval period, or starting with, we can also see the Bhakti movement, which was simply a wide opening of the doors into a beautiful movement of the popular movement of pouring out one's own heart and soul into devotion. which was very much stipulated in terms of ritual, and when it became Bhakti movement, there was a total revival or a total freedom for the people to worship the way they wanted. Then we have the 18th and 19th century revival that is taking place, people becoming more educated, and that also helped the reformers to think or understand, or they became to value the aspects of liberty, fraternity and freedom, and that they tried to bring into the Indian thought and the culture. The socio-religious reform movement, starting from the early 19th century, gradually spread to political and economical fields. Moreover, the British rule in India ushered to the contact between Indian and Western countries and cultures. Through the growth of English education, the Indian mind became familiar with Western liberalism, its love of liberty and fraternity. So we can see these three ideals getting a lot of insight into the Indian mind or the thought, or the Indian Renaissance thinkers, they were trying to bring in these thoughts of liberty, fraternity and equality. It is remarkable, and almost all the contemporary humanists had their education through the medium of English and were well versed with the best in the Western culture. So these contemporary Indian thinkers whom we are going to deal with, all of them had the best of the education in the English medium plus in the West. So that was an advantage for them to know their own culture or being rooted in their culture, plus taking what is best in the West, and they could bridge between these two and give the best to the Indian society. Another important characteristic of the contemporary Indian humanism is the synthesis of ancient Indian values and modern Western science. So these two, the ancient Indian values and modern Western science, a sincere attempt was made to bridge the gulf between faith and reason. So we have the two aspects here. That is, ancient Indian culture was so much of a tradition and long-standing. We can say that the Indian culture or the Indian tradition began much ahead of the Western culture. We have a history of ancient Indian culture going much before the Western culture as such. But what happened? We remained very much closed within. We didn't have any influence from outside. But once the British Empire began to establish itself in our country and we became subordinate to them, then a lot of interaction took place between the West and the East. So that's where the Reformation or the revival has begun. The significance of the contemporary Indian thinkers lies in the fact that they all revealed the spirit of Indian religion and philosophy to the West. They interpreted Indian humanism and dispelled the false picture of Indian values which shocked the Western world in the beginning. So we can see as the Westerners began to come into India and they began to see the different systems and traditions and customs were here, they were taken aback because it was not palpable to their reason and these practices. It was also asserted that human race could survive only by living together in a common bond of brotherhood. The humanists whom we are concerned with formed a group representing the best of Indian life. They worked for a common ideal and a universal brotherhood and offered the best that India could contribute towards the advancement of the mankind. Indian contemporary philosophy, there are some certain characteristics for this thinkers of the contemporary Indian thinkers. So what are the common characteristics which we can pinpoint, which help us to understand a little better? When we come to the study of contemporary Indian philosophy, the period starts with Rajaram Mohan Roy. The period continued from Rajaram Mohan Roy to the present day. This is the period begins from the second half of 18th century and continues up to first half of 20th century. This period is marked by its devastating and dynamic changes caused to its contemporary societies. It did not only affect the Europeans, but it affected the Indian society even. The medieval period of Indian history is totally filled with social reformations, with a modified reaffirmation of the old and ancient Vedic texts. Ancient Indian philosophies overflooded with the polytheistic theology and finally gave out their way to monism and formless monotheism. With a little modification of the stratifications of the society, the medieval reformers gave way to cults of devotion. Now that has gone away. Not only the European societies, but the Indian soil, social religions also found it to be very difficult to digest these real facts of science allowed to creep in. This marks the features of the contemporary Indian social philosophies. The orthodoxical ideas have to be put to the backgrounds, and the ideas of reformation had to be crept in. So this is what we see. We see the Indian contemporary thought, the characteristics, something which there are some common characteristics are there. The period begins with Rajaram Mohan Roy. He is the initiator, and then what has happened to this time is that a lot of the ancient Indian thought, which had a lot of backing of the Vedic text, ancient Indian philosophies are flooded with the polytheistic theology, and finally gave out their way to monism and then to formless monotheism. The orthodoxical ideas had to be put to the backgrounds, and the ideas of reformation had to be crept in. So once the science began to creep into religion, then automatically the questions will be, that means the science is not going to accept everything on the fact of the Vedic text, or it is not going to accept anything without reason. So scientific way of proving or knowing what is the truth behind, or the tradition, culture, or different aspects. So science will go in such a way, systematic way of looking into the reasons for. Rajaram Mohan Roy was such a philosopher who fought against these orthodoxical practices. They were the practices of sati, the narrow-mindedness of bhakti cult in the form of Hindu ascetic idealism. He tried to put in some sort of universalism through Brahmo Samaj, which tried to affirm the essential unity of all religions. So we can see that on account of religion, there was a lot of division. All the time, people had been identified like, I am Hindu, I am Christian, I am Muslim, and even the Hinduism itself, thousands of division taking place, and therefore the religion had practically segregated people instead of unifying them. So what we will find in the Indian contemporary thinkers is that they are trying to revive a sort of bringing together under one roof, that we are humans first, and only second only the religion comes, not the other way. So instead of dividing, we should be brought into a unity, that is, we all share the one humanity. So that's the aspect of the Brahmo Samaj, or trying to give a universalistic characteristic. So all the contemporary Indian thinkers will go into that direction of having this aspect, universalism and secularism. He tried to put in some sort of universalism through Brahmo Samaj, which tried to affirm the essential unity of all religions. He tried to incorporate certain modern ideas of the Western ideas of liberty, secularism and humanism. This marks the important characteristics of contemporary Indian philosophy. Rajaram Mohan Roy tried to assimilate the elements of Islam, Christianity and modern rationalism through his humanist philosophy. So the initiator into the contemporary Indian thinkers, Rajaram Mohan Roy, plays a vital role in the sense he began to initiate the movement of this revival or the Renaissance, the revival of the contemporary Indian thinking. It's a universalistic outlook into, or he was trying to put in all what is best in that of the other religion. This marks the important characteristic of the contemporary Indian philosophy. Rajaram Mohan Roy tried to assimilate the elements of Islam, Christianity and modern rationalism through his humanistic philosophy. He tried to show the support of Upanishads also. He marks the first glimpses of enlightenment. He initiated a new enlightenment and urged towards the future, free from the chains of outworn customs and superstitions. The Christian ideas of rejection of idol worship found through his writings. He preached the fatherhood of God. So we can observe from the following enumerated points, the actual ideas have been preached by almost all the contemporary Indian philosophers through the Reformation movements. So some common points which give the characteristics of the Indian contemporary philosophy. 1. All of them succeeded in arousing a new awareness of self-confidence and self-respect in the Indian mind. So all of them succeeded in arousing a new awareness and self-confidence and self-respect in the Indian mind. Can imagine, for long we had been subjected to the British rule, and the oppressive nature of this occupation by the Britishers and the oppression from the religion, that is the separation of the different castes based on the Chaturvarna. So people were definitely not united but segregated on account of their caste, creed and religion, plus the political, that is the governance by the Britishers. Therefore, the Indian contemporary thinkers, their first aim was to arouse an awareness of self-confidence and self-respect. So all of them we will find are trying to bring them together, speeches and writings to arouse in them an awareness of confidence, self-confidence and self-respect. 2. They tried to purge many dark blots like sati, polygamy, child marriage, infanticide, enforced widowhood, caste distinctions, untouchability, animal sacrifice, Devadasi system, etc. from the society. As I said, the society was full of superstitious practices without any proper reason for why this system or why this tradition has crept in. So there were so many of that. That means disadvantages for the lower class, advantages for the higher caste. And this disparity was very much visible. So these Indian contemporary thinkers, they were trying to purge the society of the dark bloods like sati, polygamy, child marriage, infanticide, enforced widowhood, caste distinctions, untouchability, animal sacrifice, Devadasi system. So we will see that the renaissance or revival of the Indian contemporary thought is towards this line. Third characteristic is they maintained that social reforms were not something different from national activities. So a lot of connection between these two. The social reforms are not different from the national activities. The fourth characteristic, in order to broaden the mental outlook of man, the thinkers of this period endeavored to popularize education. Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Dayananda Saraswati, Ani Besant, Vivekananda were some of these men. Invariably, we can see all the contemporary Indian thinkers trying to insist on the need of education, because that is the best means to invoke in them or instill in them self-respect, and also trying to gather them, unite them under one umbrella, bringing them that universality. The fifth characteristic, they respected people's religious sentiments. They did not wish to reject the cultural and sacred religious texts. So in doing so, that is bringing about the universal brotherhood and trying to insist on education, trying to give value to that, bringing them, arousing in them a kind of self-respect and nationalism and all that. They never trod on the religious sentiments of the people. Sixth one, without a reference to the religion of the people, they tried to uplift mankind. So this is what they have done without really focusing on to the religion. That was not their ideal, but much to the humanity or the humane nature. That was the one thing which they were directing their attention to. In this line of reformers comes next contemporary philosopher. He is Swami Dayananda Saraswati. He founded Arya Samaj. We just spoke about the Brahmo Samaj. Now this is the Arya Samaj. He tried to reinterpret the old texts of Hindu tradition with the focus of Western theology and naturalism. It helped to revive a new hope in the Indians who felt the necessity to prove their native Hindu religion not to be narrow-minded and sectarian one. He opened the gates of non-Brahmins to perform the traditional rituals. So we can see the revival that is taking place. It was the predominance or the prerogative of the Brahmins to perform the puja. They were the ones, the priests. So the priestly class, the Brahmins, they were the top in the caste system. So Brahmins, so Kshatriyas, Vaishyas and Shudras, the four divisions. And they remained always on the top, and they saw to it that or they could control the entire society and they dictated terms. So in the contemporary Indian revival or the thought, we will see persons who are coming with the ideals of, that is the performance of puja. It is not just the prerogative of the Brahmins alone, but here we can see Dayananda Saraswati allowing, that is non-Brahmins to perform the traditional rituals. He condemned idolatry, but he tried to reaffirm the faith in Indian karma siddhanta. He believed in the significance of karma and rebirth. So we can see the initiator Raja Ram Mohan Roy, then comes Dayananda Saraswati. slowly the momentum gets started. Then we have another person that we can name here Dr. Annie Besant. Annie Besant becomes the philosopher who comes under this category of that is for social work in the writings or translation of Indian texts into English. There was a renewed interest in the Indian philosophical theories as well as the heightened self-respect of a follower of Hinduism and following proud of being Hindu. So we can name Annie Besant in this line. Annie Besant becomes the philosopher who comes under this category, even though she was not Indian, but her groundwork of founding the Indian culture on the stern ideals of European wisdom, the wisdom of the West, is unparalleled. Dr. Besant came forward to see that Indian religion revives itself in an enriched universal education and political participation. Indian texts, both Buddhist and Hindu teachings say that this apparent Vyavaharika world is of a lower order and there will be a higher life. To participate in power and political games means to lower ourselves to the demands of unreal and temporal life. This she countered with her European experience and tried to prove that political participation makes one nearer to establish the ideal through an ideal republic. So we can see that it's not only the religious fervor that is required, but a political participation is also equally important, and that we can see in this respect. We now try to consider the second phase of the developments of contemporary Indian philosophy. This period is marked by awakened reaction against foreign and the invader, the British Emperor, with an awakened self-respect. So for what we have been seeing, how the revival started, the Raja Ram Mohan Roy, trying to unite the Indians, trying to instill in them the self-respect. We are Indians, we have a tradition that is quite ancient, and we need not submit ourselves to this British rule. We have the self-respect, and then trying to bring about the reform through education, his constant speeches, visiting the villages, trying to bring them together. We can see them always 24 hours on the move, filled with this enthusiasm. That means they must do something to change, or bring about a change in the society. A total dedication to the cause of the Indians. They saw on the one side how the Indians were subjugated or made slaves, or the British or the foreign rule, and then how the religion also became very oppressive, and then the total ignorance for the people. They thought that it is their fate to be like that. So Raja Ram Mohan Roy was trying the best to instill in them that it is not our fate. We have to work against that. We have to throw away that superstition that it is fate. It's nothing to do with that. We can change the destiny by making an effort, and that was his aim, or the initiation which he has given into this revival thought. And then we have another person coming into, that is Dayananda Saraswati, who became real breaker of the tradition. That means the traditional rituals which are performed by only the Brahmins, now he is there making a total change in that, are allowing the non-Brahmins to perform the traditional pujas. And then we have Dr. Annie Besant, who is not an Indian but very much rooted in the Indian soil, with the ideals of Indian nationalism and all that, trying to revive the spirit of India and trying to tell the people that political participation is very equally important as we focus on the religious and social changes. So we now try to consider the second phase. That was the first phase. Second phase is a revolt against the domination of the Britishers. This becomes the very spirit which tried to initiate a reaction in the form of an increased respect towards Hinduism. The men here were Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Swami Vivekananda. Both of them became the foundation stones for the renewed self-respect of Indians. Indians started to respect their own religion and also found universal values in their own religion. Now, here we will come to a different kind of philosophers of our contemporary India. Both have influenced much the very populace of Indian society. Both have undergone the experience of mystic realms. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa experienced the very being of Kali, who is in black color and who appeared to him with a blue sky as her background. Ramakrishna called that experience as Advaitic one because he had that experience as an experience of the union of oneself with the Absolute. On the other hand, Ramakrishna made Vivekananda to experience the very being and the presence of the divine essence that comes through the initiation of Swami Vivekananda. So Swami Vivekananda was going about asking everyone, have you seen God? Or where God exists and all that. That would have been his question. And these two persons who stand for the very important element of that self-respect of the Indians. That is Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who was the teacher, and Vivekananda as a pupil. So both of their philosophy has got a lot to do with the Indian Renaissance. This had made Vivekananda an unconquerable and infallible in the supporter and activist of Hindu religion. His Chicago lecture affected the whole populace of the world as well as the Hindus to feel proud of their own religion. So Swami Vivekananda's speech in the World Parliament is very, very famous. We can observe the renewed respect in the mystic experiences of these philosophers. They tried to reinforce people's faith in the mysterious religious practices. They actually developed that strength in Indian society to thrive with vehemence and the realization of the ascetic ideals like celibacy, fasting, ascetic practice, practice of yoga, selfless renunciation, etc. Vivekananda established a Ramakrishna mission in this regard, and the only thing he wanted to show is that there is a scope of good Hinduism also, and it can be brought out with a fight against the evils present in it. So what was the ideals both of them were doing? That is Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, who had an experience, mystical experience of the divine, and he names it as Advaitic, not Dvaita, but Advaita, it's a one. Advaitic experience of God. And he made Vivekananda also to experience that mystical experience, and from then onwards Vivekananda became a wonderful follower of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, and he made that movement, Ramakrishna mission, in the sense to make or activities which are undertaken by this movement in order to bring about the self-respect and the interest of the people, or to instill in them that self-respect and to become proud of their own inheritance, or we can say the ancient values. and his World Parliament address, that's in World Religions, and his speech remains unique even today. So this was the contribution what they have done in order to make the Indian contemporary thinking, and they began to introduce a lot of that ascetic ideals like fasting, celibacy, practice of yoga, selfless renunciation, etc. Vivekananda established the Ramakrishna mission in this regard, and the only thing he wanted to show is that there is a scope of good in Hinduism also. It can be brought out with a fight against the evils present in it. So we have to remedy the evils present in one's own system in order to remedy that, to revive that. He tried to show that Hinduism is having a universal vision. This puts him in his mission in the service of the poor and the suffering humanity of India. He preached sannyasa, renunciation of one's own interest, and he asked the youth to participate in the social and national service. He did not tolerate any kind of evil that is present within Hinduism. It is his total renunciation and self-sacrifice that makes him a social reformer in the upliftment of the weaker and helpless sections of the society. So what gives importance to Vivekananda, the movement which he has begun, is that he is trying to make an overall development. That is, there is a reason he wants to put in, that education he is insisting on, plus trying to remedy the evils which is in one's own system. It is a missionary movement that he actually started. His impressions remained through the ages, wherefrom we find the later Indian generations take that person solely as their inspirer when they confront British Raj in philosophy or politics. So we are trying to see the little contribution made by, of course we will be elaborating their contributions in detail. It's only an introduction to the contemporary Indian thinkers, how the lineage begins from Raja Ram Mohan Roy downwards, what had been the thought pattern. Next we come to Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi is universally known as Mahatma Gandhi. Mahatma literally connotes a great soul. He has become a universal human. He has outgrown all the boundaries of nationality and religion. Internationally, he is acclaimed as one of the greatest figures of history and also a great teacher of humanity. Louis Fisher, Gandhi's eminent biographer, has concluded his biography with the following words: his legacy is courage, his lesson, truth, his weapon, love. His life is his monument. He now belongs to mankind. A beautiful, what we can say that it is a beautiful epithet or a beautiful saying on what Gandhi, according to the biographer, that is Louis Fisher, best biographer, says that his legacy is courage. So we can see from the life of Gandhi, never compromised on truth. Truth is God, God is truth. That is the way he had been going. So we cannot have another philosopher in Indian history that was celebrated to such extent like Mahatma Gandhi. He is a revolt against slavery, consequent upon various political factors and socio-religious upsurge. India was divided, much against his will, in two nations and granted independence. The partition of India and the outbreak of communal violence shattered his dream, and with a heavy heart, he tried his best to remove communal frenzy and violence. He tried out, toured extensively and the affected areas. While thousands of soldiers and policemen could not bring normalcy, his presence, personal appeal, and moral courage could bring a sea of violence. He bring a sea of change in the situation, particular in Noakhali, the worst affected region. Finally, being moved by his inner voice, he decided to go on a fast to death to arouse the conscience of all. He considered his death would be a more glorious deliverance than witnessing the destruction of India due to communal violence. So we can see the moment we think about Mahatma Gandhi, we are reminded of our independence. So what a struggle he had to go through. So prior to Gandhi, definitely the Indian contemporary thought had already begun. Now Gandhi forms one in the line, but there is a lot happening with Mahatma Gandhi. A person who literally stood for what is meant by truth and never compromised on that, and he always fought for what is right and always with identifying himself with the less privileged ones. So when the partition came, it was so much against his wish. He never wanted a partition like that. He wanted an India compromising of all the different religions, peoples, and from different parts. Never to have this idea of dividing, that is a Hindustan, Pakistan. That was not at all his idea. So against that, his own wish divided, and then he made a fast turn to death to make them realize that his death would be more glorious, that is to stop the communal violence. His fast had a tremendous effect on Hindu-Muslim amity. Riots stopped both in India and Pakistan. Truly, Gandhi has become a universal man. He is recognized as a moral genius comparable with Jesus and Buddha despite all his shortcomings and human commissions. His non-violent struggle, the first of its kind in human history, has been a great ray of hope to settle all human conflicts in a turbulent world for peaceful coexistence. So something unique contribution of Gandhi to the world is his non-violent method of, that is the struggle, non-violent struggle. It is the assertion and the strong adherence to the metaphysical ideas of the ancient Hindu idealism. Ancient Hindus believed in the phenomenon of bondage, rebirth, and the liberation for the moksha. They once again saw the seers of Upanishad speaking to them with their expositions in the form of Upanishadic contents. So we are seeing the different persons who are coming in the line of this thought. Next in the line we have Sri Aurobindo, started to interpret Upanishads and the Vedic literature in a modern context, claiming the very presence of a universal outlook with these texts. People started to believe yoga in its extensive context, and Gandhi simply was recognized as a karma yogi, and having performed his duties towards the state, who had gone up to the state of Mahatma in this context. The overall effect of this evolution simply incorporated with Hinduism the ideas of humanism, the belief in the service of man as the service of God, the ascetic ideals of brahmacharya, the ethical precepts of Ashtanga Yoga, and the transformation of soul. They tried to strengthen the Hindu religion with the humanistic, rationalistic ideas with a committed reformative attitude. The discriminatory practices were given up. The Marxian idea of community wealth became the foundation of trusteeship and the guardianship of those trustees. Owners of wealth were advised to consider themselves as trustees of that wealth. There were so many parallel developments to the developments of the world historic phenomenon. Sarvodaya and social reformation and service to the downtrodden all have been wedded with the context of their earlier and ancient cultural wisdom. This marks the very beginning of a new history of contemporary India to claim its political freedom from the foreign rule and subjection. So this had been what Gandhi was doing. That is Sarvodaya, his idea of the development of everyone or the betterment of everyone. And he had a wonderful plan for every section of the society. Sri Aurobindo is one of the most profound thinkers of contemporary thoughts and was the most enlightened and reactionary of the same time of all the Indian philosophers. He had given more importance on the inner development of human mind than the external forms of our life and living. For him, in the process of our development, human beings moves towards a definite goal, towards a perfect end, and towards a spiritual perfection of mankind. He feels that yoga perfects individual and leads them to the national emancipation. He tried to achieve synthesis between East and West. He defines the whole process of evolution through involution and evolution of the mind or the psychic life. So from Gandhi we move to Sri Aurobindo, who becomes a critic of the type of development which is required. The next in the line we will see is Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, who was born at Tiruthani on September 5 in the year 1888. He was influenced by Tagore and Swami Vivekananda. While Vivekananda introduced the Hindu mind to the West, Radhakrishnan introduced Hindu philosophy to the West. He marks the unique character of an academic philosopher in the history of contemporary Indian philosophy. His knowledge of Indian religion and philosophy, in the one hand, is the study of philosophy of Western tradition, helps him to bridge the gap, the East and the West. His philosophical ideas are taken from Vedanta. So we see from Raja Ram Mohan Roy, then Dayananda Saraswati, Annie Besant, then Mahatma Gandhi, Tagore, Aurobindo, so many persons following the line, and how they have made this contribution of that Indian contemporary thought in order to bring about a change, that is make the people to have the self-respect and instill in them a hope and a courage that ours is not this. We need to really work out and we have to fight our own way to freedom. From Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan we go to, that is Jiddu Krishnamurthy. He was born on 11th May 1895 in South India in a small town called Madanapalli. Unlike the above personalities, we are having another great philosopher, J. Krishnamurthy, who is concerned of our life and its problems which we face in our everyday life. He used to think how one can bring peace and awaken the spiritual quality of our everyday life. So that is a new way of bringing about the change in oneself. We are going to bring together the different points in the contemporary Indian thought. The following points are the core values that shaped the identity of contemporary Indian philosophy. 1. It did not lose its basic Indian philosophical characteristic of a belief in bondage and rebirth concept due to dominant karma Siddhanta of Vedic civilization, which polarized society into tight compartments of social and racial organization. So the first point is that in that the revival, the contemporary Indian philosophy did not lose its basic Indian philosophical characteristic of a belief in the bondage and rebirth concept. So it continues to be one of the dominant theme of the Indian philosophy, the philosophy of karma. 2. Only the reformative ideals of liberty, democracy, and humanistic ideals did affect it to change to some extent of its basic divisions of its social and racial organization. 3. Negativism towards nature and excessive dependence on ritualism with a bent of mind towards renunciation and seclusion from daily commitments of social life becomes the predominant characteristic of Indian social thought. This was to some extent disturbed. 4th, orthodoxy and pan-religion metaphysical thinking marks the very beginning of the contemporary Indian social thinking. With the active work of Rajaram Mohan Roy, this gets changed. 5. Contemporary Indian philosophers tried to reinterpret the Indian text with a more realistic world attitude. This helped the contemporary Indian philosophy to open its new trends of philosophical thinking. 6. The mystic experiences of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa and Vivekananda form the basic core of contemporary Indian thinking. 7. Rabindranath Tagore and Gandhi make contemporary Indian philosophy to actualize social change. Rabindranath Tagore's artistic expressions mark a new beginning in the Indian artistic mind and thinking. 8. The much observed drive for a heightened self-respect with an invigorated religious activity with a Hindu frame of thinking marks the very contemporary Indian philosophy. 9. Humanism becomes the unique thread around which all the contemporary Indian philosophical cobweb of metaphysical thinking had netted its creative constructions. 10. Science was challenged as inadequate and inexperienced in social matters. This lays the foundation for its modernist epoch. 11. Marxism and socialism did not affect much of contemporary Indian thinking. As a compensation, the ideas of commonwealth and trusteeship of all the owning of the rich class show its aversion towards communism. 12. The sole purpose of contemporary Indian philosophy becomes to strengthen its historic identity and to respect its religious thinking to counter the foreign rulers and their agencies. 13. The highest goal becomes the liberation of Indian nation from its slavery. This shapes all of its philosophers' ideas regarding liberation. 14. Jiddu Krishnamurti carries a new wave of thinking with him as a challenger to the orthodoxical religious thinkers of India as well as the whole world. But his final refuge in modified religious text draws a null vector in this attitude towards scientific facts. 15. Post-independence philosophers ventured maximum to upkeep the glory of their ancient wisdom. Even though there were so many philosophers, they have opted, any one of them, to the mechanisms those were enumerated just in the beginning lines of this understanding. It becomes the very characteristic of contemporary Indian philosophy that it adopted itself selectively to the flooding counter ideas of science and Christian philosophy. It's a simple struggle for the identity of age-old Indian wisdom, either it be Vedic, Buddhist or Jaina in essence. So here we see put together the various traits of Indian contemporary thought. In all, they were trying one aspect, that is to dedicate themselves to the cause of India, to bring about the freedom and the real understanding of the humanity. So in this, what we see in this contemporary Indian thinkers is that an idea of a revival, renewal of religion, renewal of society, renewal of the human person, the overall development. So this seems to be, this is the general introduction to various thinkers of the contemporary Indian philosophy or Indian thought, the Renaissance, how this renewal or the revival has come about. From next we will go into detail the different persons who had been the contributors, or in detail about their philosophy, their contribution, and what way they made the Indians to feel proud of their country, their religion, their ancient antiquity, or what they had received as a great wisdom, and all that we will follow in the next lectures.